Your ears do not deceive you. You have just entered the Cryptid Creator Corner, brought to you by your friends at Comic Book Yeti. So without further ado, let's get on to the interview.
Hello and welcome to Comic Book Yeti's Cryptid Creator Corner. I am one of your hosts, Jimmy Gasparo, and wow is all I can say for the guest I have today. He's written a couple of comics you might have heard of, like Southern Bastards, Scout. He's written Punisher, Max, The Avengers, Thor. He has been involved in the War of the Realms. We're going to talk about Bug Wars, and there's Absolute Superman. There are too many to name, quite frankly. We could just take up 40 minutes of the podcast, me listing all of his credits. Oh, Star Wars, which is one of my favorite Star Wars runs. But please welcome to the podcast, Jason Aaron. Jason, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing very good. I'm very excited to talk to you. I've read, I've read a handful of the things you've written over the years, but I um I'm a big fan of your work, and I I thought Bug Wars was I d- so surprising. I think to me, it seems like you and Mahmud Asrar, who's the artist on it, and it's Matthew Wilson and Becca Carey's
Right.
the rest of the creative team. Heather Antos is the editor. I it it just it was billed, I think, when I first heard about it, and I think this was in the issue somewhere that it's like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids meets Game of Thrones, and I thought, oh, that's like a really fun kind of premise, and it seemed almost too good to be true, and it is so damn beautiful in the execution of it. I mean, it is like it has become my favorite series. I'm telling everybody about it. I've read the first volume. I read it again today, getting ready for this, and I just it's so much fun. First off, Mahmoud's artwork is phenomenal. Um, yeah, I don't. It just seems not like it's wrong to say it seems like a strange choice, like, at this point in your career, but, like, damn it, it's just so much fun. I, um, I love it. Uh,
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, it certainly feels that way for me and Mahmood both. I mean, the Honey, I Shrunk the Kids meets Game of Thrones was my tagline. I think that's the best way to kind of sum this story up. It is on the surface what would be a kid story. You know, the oh no, I'm shrunk kind of stories. The like, kid finds some mystical relic and it shrinks him down to the size of a bug and he goes on an adventure in his backyard. That's usually going to be something you're going to watch on Disney Plus, right? Like that's a kid
oh, yeah.
story. This is the decidedly not kid story version of that.
Yeah,
So
it
the
is decidedly not for kids.
right, the kid is we don't say his exact age. I mean, he's a teenager. He's got an older brother. Um and the world he finds in his backyard is incredibly violent and brutal and deadly. And then there's kingdoms of tiny people called mites who live among the various kinds of insects. So there's the ant people and the beetle people and the maggot monks and the um, wasp riders who are like sort of like the wasp riding Vikings. Um, and this kid gets plopped into the middle of this world, and he comes to discover that his dad had some kind of his dad who's died, who got horribly eaten to death by insects, knew about this and was a part of it. And so it's sort of like a weird Southern family drama, which I've written a few of those.
Oh,
Um,
sure.
it's set in Alabama where I grew up. It's literally set. It's I've said, strangely enough, this is like one of the most personal books I've ever done, which it's the most like true fantasy kind of story I've done, but it is deeply personal in that house and that backyard were my backyard when I was 10, 12 years old, when I was the age when I was watching Thundarr the Barbarian on Saturday morning and discovering Robert E. Howard Conan stories and falling in love with comics and spending most of my time when I was not inside reading, running around that yard and running through those woods, making up stories. I think falling in love with storytelling and really to me, I think my origin story as a writer is that backyard. So this is the same yard. Like I drew the map. Um, and then Becca Carey cleaned it up and did a much prettier version of it. But this feels like a story about me getting in touch with that kid version of myself, all the stuff that kid was into. One of the first comics I fell in love with was Sword of the Atom, which was, Ray Palmer, the Atom, going on a fantasy adventure in the
Right.
finding this lost civilization of tiny, tiny people. So the roots of this kind of go all the way back to that. But this is really about me taking all that stuff I was into as a kid, stuff that was really going to define, I think, who I was ultimately going to be as a comic book writer. And just, you know, me, present day guy who's been doing this for 20 years now, doing my take on all the stuff that kid was into.
Yeah.
And yeah, the first trade just came out last month. It's the first 6 issues. It's a pretty beefy trade because we did a bunch of back matter in every issue, kind of different documents detailing what's the society of the ant people like, and how is that different than the spider witches, and we dive deep into that and all the back matter. So all that's in there. Plus, we had a couple of oversized issues, so it's a big hefty chunk. Uh, 6 issues, really a kind of story with a beginning, middle, and an end. But that's just the beginning, and there's a lot more Bug Wars to come.
Well, I'm excited. I love the back matter, and yeah, each kind of issue ends, for listeners with some drawings, some sketches of the different sects of the mites, and like more information about them and about their kind of their civilization. Because there's so much like intense world building that is done, in the like all throughout the comic. Like there's so much to look at in this. And yeah, it's interesting to hear you say it's like a deeply personal story like that is your backyard that you grew up in. Do you think this is a story you still could have written earlier in your career, or is it something that you now, as you've done so many different comics and told different stories, that you've come around to telling this one?
I mean, it's definitely an idea I've had for a long time. Like it's one I've been kicking around, and I had it under different titles in kind of different forms. I had some of the family part of it sketched out, different ideas for the different sects of mites, but it really took a long time to come together. I think there was stuff I needed to do before I could do this. I think I needed to write Thor. World building was a big part of my Thor run, and the War of the Realms. The whole idea of that was really just I want to explore the different realms of Norse mythology because they're kind of a big part of um, Thor's landscape and what separates him from all the other heroes. Because Spider-Man's not going to Niflheim or Svartalheim to fight crime. Thor is the only one doing that, and I didn't when I took over as Thor writer, I couldn't name all those realms. I didn't know who lived there or how they were different, and so I wanted the book to go to each one, and I loved doing that stuff and using a war to kind of explore all those realms and who lived there and dig a little bit into the culture of that. I've always been a big fantasy nerd, kind of going back to when I first read Robert E. Howard stuff and first read Lord of the Rings. So I wanted to do an even deeper dive version of that. So Bug Wars, I mean, I love the idea that the power of that sort of metaphor of you can step outside your back door as a kid and any kind of kingdom you want to imagine is there waiting for you. In this kid's case, it's literally there in his backyard. So there's, people hidden under that brush pile, and a kingdom in the overgrown garden over there. And so I'd loved
Yeah.
using that back matter to dive deep into, what is the culture of the spider witches and the culture of the wasp raiders and all that stuff like that's been even more fun than I thought it would be, doing that stuff. And we did quite a bit of it, and you'll continue to see more of that. The next thing we're doing with Bug Wars is we have, Bug Wars the Spider Witch special, which comes out in January, which is an oversized one shot. I want to do kind of over time. We'll do sort of different versions of these, kind of big specials, focusing on the different, sects of might. So we start out with the spider witches, who are, we met one of those. Wista, who was one of the main characters in book one, was a spider witch. So this is
Mhm.
this issue will, kind of be a buffer between book one and book two, and you'll get stories that tease what's to come in book two. You'll get stories, um, that are kind of flashbacks and fill in, stuff we didn't know, moments we haven't seen before, fill in more of kind of, the weird dark society of these spider witches. So it's got multiple stories in it, and I did for the back matter in that one. I wrote a prose story, which I actually did for the Bug Wars Ash Can that we put out at New York Comic Con, last year. I wrote a prose story in that was like a prequel to book one, basically, that I didn't reprint. We didn't reprint in the issue one. It's not in the trade. I wanted to use Bug Wars as a kind of way to get back to writing prose, because I used to do a lot of that before my comic career took off. So did another story, a bigger one, prose story that'll, is a flashback kind of about something else pulled from the journals of Slade Slaymaker's dad. So Professor Jim Slaymaker, who used to walk the yard before his kid did. We get a glimpse. You get a glimpse of him in book one, and I wanted him to look like, he was from a cheesy 1970s, fantasy or sci-fi movie, sort of like,
Yeah.
what's the one where Sean Connery is like mostly naked?
Zardoz, isn't it?
Zardoz, yes. So his outfit is kind of similar to that.
Yeah.
So we get a glimpse of kind of what his adventures were like when he was the one exploring the yard. Um,
Oh, that's awesome.
and Mahmud, draws a story in that. He writes a story in that. Um, and then I wrote the main story, which, Baltimore Rivas, drew, who's another great, Kansas City artist. Um, and so I think it's going to be a pretty cool package. We do, we got different cool variant covers, and we also, for the first time, we're doing, one of those polybagged covers. So we did like Mahmoud drew a decidedly not safe for work cover, um, our triple X. I wanted to call it a bug fucking crazy variant, but we thought better of that. But no, that's what it
That's
is in
pretty
heart.
good.
So it's one of
Okay.
those. We're not going to show it to you. You're going to have to go out and buy that variant and rip it open if you want to see it. We're not putting it online anywhere. So yeah, that'll be the special that comes out in January, and then we'll get book two, later next year. Should be in next summer, and that'll be, Mahmoud coming back to draw the entirety of that. It'll be, I think, a little bit bigger, a little bit longer than book one. And there'll be some new characters. We'll go to a couple of spots in the yard that we didn't get to in book one, and that there's more stuff on that map in issue
Mhm.
one than we saw. So there's a couple more parts for us to explore. There's a couple more, in particular, there's one sect that we haven't met at all, really, and that's the the Roach Knights who live in the house. They're the one tribe of mites who live around people. So their culture and everything is very different about them. I love those. I've always loved those kind of stories about these uh, tiny people living under, right underneath their feet. So I like the version of that that's in the backyard. But there's also a big part of those stories are like the borrowers or the littles, and it's people who live
Yeah.
in a house, in the floorboards of a house or in the walls. And I've always loved that. So I think you can expect, another map, like a cutaway showing what does the Roach Knight kingdom look like, hidden in the attic or beneath the floorboards. Um, so we'll have a lot more stuff, new characters and new stuff to dive into in book 2, including, if you read book 1, there's kind of a glimpse of another faction you get at the very, very end of that on the last page.
Yeah, that's
Um,
won't spoil it, but that's
sure.
a pretty cool reveal.
So there'll be more to come with those guys as well.
Awesome.
And that's still to me just the beginning. Like when you launch a creator-owned book, you never really know how it's going to go. I mean, they're all so very different. Every concept is new. It's about kind of how sales are at that moment in time. Does this book catch anybody's attention or does it not? You never know. You never have any idea. I felt good about the concept and felt great about the work that Mahmud was putting on the page, and I think it's a beautiful, beautiful book. But still, you never know. Is anybody going to care about this? They're going to pick it up. Thankfully, the book did well, so I mean, we already wanted to continue it and do more of it. I didn't want to launch it as an ongoing series. I like the idea of trying to do this as kind of a series of minis and one shots. I know that to me, there's no perfect recipe for right now of how you launch a successful creator-owned book. I think you have to do what works for each one. So I know,
Yeah.
if you got a subscription at your local comic shop or on one of those sites where you can set up subscriptions, means you have to go resubscribe. Maybe you can tell your local comic shop, give me all the Bug Wars whenever it comes out. Maybe you got to go, well, now I subscribed to the first miniseries, now I got to go subscribe to the next one. I know that's a pain in the butt, but I do think this is the best way to tell this story. So there'll continue to be more volumes after book 2, and they'll kind of the cast will grow, the scale of it will grow and expand, and I've got a big overall arc for the story that we're telling. But beyond that, I don't think even that is necessarily the end of this story. I mean, there's still stories to be told about flashbacks about the dad and what he was up to in the yard. There's the question of, what are these mites and where do they come from? Are they only for some reason in this one backyard in this small town in Alabama? If so, why? Um, and then kind of what happens with Slade and his family? What happens if his mom finds out about this? I think there's so many stories I would love to tell with these characters in this world, in kind of different forms. Like I said, I'm loving doing the prose stories as well. So, assuming that people want to continue to read it, and continue to pick it up, I think we have lots and lots of Bug Wars stories to give you guys.
No, I mean, the world is so rich, and you mentioned it earlier in terms of the family drama at the heart of it, because you have the mystery of their father's death, of Jim's death, um, and then you have I guess you've set up the conflict between the two brothers. Mom trying to you instantly see mom struggling, like trying to do everything she can to kind of keep, the family together. And then Slade goes on this, little, uh, no pun intended, adventure in the backyard, and setting that family conflict up in the beginning, and then kind of peppering the scenes as to what's going on with mom and the older brother Sydney throughout is, um, I mean, it just really captures that the family drama of it all in between Slade going on this absolutely wild adventure. One of the things I was thinking about with your writing in particular, and series like Southern Bastards and Scalped in particular, is, making them feel authentic. And I always think that language in particular, like the way your characters talk, is kind of the most effective way to do that. And it's something you do very well. And I was thinking about that reading this because the language in terms of the curses in this is like next level. Um where do you think like that comes from? Like to dig in to do that? Because I think there's an art to it where and your characters, like in particular, I usually don't read from the comics, but
A
just so the
reading
listeners,
from Bug Wars
a reading
lost
from
on the
Bug
artist.
Wars issue 2, if you will indulge me, Jason. But just so listeners understand, like what we're talking about, if you haven't read Bug Wars yet, this is a scene in issue 2, and this is just one of my favorite speeches that a character yells. He says, "Scab of the Black Nest spits on your truce. No true raider would ever accept the shame of peace. We sting until we die. From now until the end bugs come, until the sky turns black, from the swarming of the my brood will burn the city to the ground. My wasps will lay their eggs in your mother's eyes. Your blood beasts are weak. My bodily humors will burn holes in their bowels and leave them drowning in their own drizzling shit." I mean, this is just a little taste.
Poetry, right?
I, I honestly think it is. I mean, it is. There's so many moments like that though, where you have like these. Yeah, this is the total setup for like a kid's fantasy adventure. I mean, but the way these characters speak and act and the brutality of it all. But I was asking you about the language. Like, is that just something that you've kind of mastered over the years? Is there something about your background that you think you are particularly good at this? Because I think you are. I mean, what
Well,
is it?
thanks. I mean, no, I mean, I certainly don't feel like I've mastered anything. I mean, um, I mean, what you see right there is multiple drafts. Like the language of this, the language is such a huge important part of fantasy stories, right? Like the names of things, the names of characters, the names of weapons, the names of factions, names of places, and then just how these characters talk, and how do the Beetle writers talk in a way that's different from the ant people, like that's all part of the world building. So thankfully with Bug Wars we had a luxury of time, and that Mahmoud and I have been we worked on book one for a long time. I had the idea, I had fleshed out the world, and fleshed out notes on the different sects. Started working on scripts. Mahmoud started drawing. Even as we moved forward, I continued to go back and rewrite the language of the book. So characters' names changed. Some of them changed 3, 4, 5 times, until we actually, until I actually got to the point where okay, we're sitting issue 1 to print. So anything in that is locked in. But I went back and changed a lot of stuff and kept the names that when Slade gets his amulet and kind of takes on these powers and fill in this role. What is that role called? Those names changed again and again and again. And so that scene that you read, that scene in particular, I know that was not the version that was in at all the version that was in the first draft of that issue that I wrote. Maybe not in the second draft. So I think having that luxury of time. I mean, I always go back and do lettering drafts of whenever I write a script, when it gets drawn, I go back and want to tweak everything. Now that I'm looking at the art, to take stuff out and change stuff around, and I do that all the time. with Bug Wars, I did that to a profound degree, a much greater degree, because because we had the time to do so. Two, because this stuff was all being born, as we were making this. So we're figuring out as we go, like, what do these characters look like? What are they called? How do they sound? Like that stuff was all growing and changing. We were figuring it out together. And then again, because this is the biggest kind of true fantasy story I've ever done. I'm a big fantasy nerd. And I wanted to get it right. I wanted it to be the best version of itself that it could be. So that's why I think I just kept going back to that over and over and over again. And also because, I mean, again, as I've said this many times, like, writing for me feels a very selfish pursuit, and that I just sit down and make up stuff that makes me happy. I don't know how else to do this. I think that has to be kind of the extent of the audience that you write for, is the audience of one. So I also couldn't stop thinking about this world, even as I needed to go write other stuff. There were times where I was like, you know what? I can't work on this script this week because this Bug War stuff is like clawing at the end of my inside of my skull, trying to get out. And there are times I remember got to meet Ray Bradbury years ago when I was in college, and he talked about, sometimes you have to write like what's boiling on the stove, like that's the thing that really wants to come out right now, and so you need to chase that one. So Bug Wars was like that for me a lot of the time over the course of the year or so that we were working on it. So I was also doing it just because it made me happy, and because those cylinders were firing in my head, wanting to figure that stuff out. And so the moment that I got to issue 6, finished writing it, I was missing it. I was like, we got to figure out, like, when are we getting more out? And so kind of jumped right into the special, and then have been working on book 2. So yeah, there's writing is work, like, I mean, maybe I've read Cormac McCarthy talked about how he just kind of sat down and the stuff just flowed out. That was the great Cormac McCarthy, but the rest of us, like it's work. Like, you kind of build it in phases, like you're an
Yeah.
architect, figuring out a house. Like, you got to have the designs, but then you got to lay the foundation and build the walls. And what I say this like I know how to build a house. I have no idea how to build a house. All I know how to do is write comic books, but I just know it. You get it on paper and in kind of different stages until you get a finished product, and then you go back and look at it again, and look at it again and again and again until. I mean, working in comics, you're always working on deadlines. So sometimes, it's I don't remember who first said it, but that old saying of, like, a project is never done, it's just abandoned. At some point it's got to go, like, it's got to go to the printer. It's got to be done. You got to let it go. But with Bug Wars, thankfully, like I said, it's ours. So, we got to decide when it was coming out, how many pages it needed to be, all that kind of stuff, which I love the luxury of that, but also just had the time to pour over it again and again and again until it got to a point. I mean, sometimes when you do that, it gets to the point where you have no ability to discern anymore if it's any good or not, because you've looked at it 1,000 times and you're like, maybe this is garbage. Maybe everyone will hate it. I have no idea. These words are all just gibberish to me now because I've read it a million times. But before you get to that point, I think you get to shape it and reshape it, and again and again and again until you get it to, as like finely chiseled as you could possibly make it.
What do you do though when you do get to that point? If you've worked it to the point where you want, you're in your own head about it. You don't know, is this any good? Like, what do you do then? Is it just like, well, it's got to go.
Yeah, usually by that point, it's like, it's got to go out the door. So it's like, I don't know. You don't want to make any crazy last minute decisions. Like I watched an episode, one of the cooking shows one time where they're always cooking under the clock, and it's clock's ticking down. This guy's made this lovely, lovely dish. And then last minute, he just decides to crack a raw egg on top of it, and then instantly realizes as time expires, like, why did I do that? That was that's a terrible idea.
Yeah.
So sometimes you just have to, you're walking a fine line of confidence, of feeling like, this is good. I know what I'm doing, and feeling like, oh, this is garbage. I'll never work again. You just kind of bounce back and forth between the two of those, but just try to do the best version that you can.
Yeah. I wanted to ask, you had the intro for the trade. It's an intro by an entomologist. And like the different species of bugs and the way they're all talked about I mean, it seems like you've done a ton of research to get a lot of that, right. Was this an interest of yours or just the nature of you're doing Little People and you're doing Bug Wars? Because it seems very detailed.
No, not really an interest of mine. I mean, other than being a kid who grew up in the woods, grew up in the backwoods, and I spent all my time rolling around in the grass and lifting up rocks and looking
Mhm.
at what crawled out from underneath. But no, I'd never read that much about insects before until I realized, okay, we're going to do this book, and then I loaded up. There's various shelves of lots and lots of bug, research books, from like the really intellectual down to like the ones written for children, because those usually have better pictures, like big,
Yeah. Yeah.
big, big,
Well,
colorful pictures. So Mahmud and I have both like loaded up on bug books. And yeah, I mean, the bugs in the book are all real. There's no like, we haven't introduced like any completely fictional insects yet. This yard again is a little yard in the backwoods of Alabama, yet it contains insects from all over the world. And that you find out the dad was, he kind of left his family in dire financial straits when he died, because he owed so many thousands of dollars to exotic insect dealers from all over the planet, because he was buying all these rare bugs. So any insect that is interesting from anywhere on the planet somehow magically exists in this one yard. So yeah,
oh yeah.
all the bugs we talk about in the back matter are real insects, and I just dug up all the weirdest, grossest ones I could possibly find.
Well,
The all the spiders who lay their young, in the flesh of their living bugs so that they can eat them from the inside when they're hatched. That's the kind of bug insights that you get in
oh
this
yeah.
series.
Yeah.
But I've said from the get go, if you love bugs, this is the book for you. Also, if you hate bugs, this is also the book for you. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
Dr. Adrian Smith, who does a lot of, he's like a bug influencer basically. He's big on Instagram and has a lot of stuff on YouTube. He's also a comic fan, so he I did some videos with him that Image Comics set up, kind of when we were first promoting the book, and then got him to write the intro, which was really fun. And he talked about, part of his intro is he talks about, in Action Comics #1, when it's like page 1 or page 2, right from the get go, when they're talking about explaining Superman's powers, they're referencing, crickets jumping and bugs that can lift way more than their body weight, and just so using insects to kind of define the very first superhero, which I thought was really interesting.
yeah. Yeah. Well, we record this, I'm recording it from my basement, which is as I walk down here, right where I was going to sit to record. My basement is home to camel crickets, so
Sure.
yeah. So I was thinking about that as I came down here to record this about Bug Wars. I had to deal with a camel cricket in my spot.
Well,
Um,
it was last week or the week before I was working on that Bug Wars pro story, the one for the Spider Witch special. So a story that goes very deep into kind of, there's a spider going around killing mites, and we learn about the its connection to this particular witch. So writing a lot of spider centric stuff. And then I
mhm.
sit down here. I'm also in the basement. Then I sit down here on my love seat to watch TV, and there's a spider crawling on me. So I don't know if that was a good sign or a bad, if they were trying to stop me from revealing their secrets, or
Yeah,
just
they
like
have a
giving me a hey, good job, buddy.
they have a plot. They have
They
a
just
plot to stop
right.
you.
They just want me to know they're watching, I guess.
Um, I wanted to talk about a little bit, if we could, the work you've been doing for DC in the Absolute universe in terms of Absolute Superman, which it's been amazing. I mean, all of those stories that DC are putting out now, um, it, you know, working on something like that, kind of, getting to, you know, play in the Superman sandbox, but not being bound by really all the years of continuity is is that like more freeing than if it was like the regular continuity Superman, or like it's Superman, no matter what, it's stressful and there's guidelines you have to go by in terms of editorial.
I mean, yes and no to that, I guess. I mean, I think for me, especially me coming in as a guy who is as a writer is brand new at DC, right? Like I'm the new kid on the block and I just showed up. Um excuse me. So I've been, I grew up as a DC kid. I read so many of the kind of books right before Crisis and then right after Crisis were my sweet spot. I devoured pretty much everything DC was doing. But then I've been more firmly mired in Marvel continuity over the course of the last 17 years because that's where I was working full time. So still read a lot of DC stuff, but I haven't worked there. So for me coming over, the chance to get to do a completely fresh take on Superman, yeah, is incredibly liberating and freeing. And that, like, oh wow, I don't have to worry about anything. I don't have to worry about any Superman story that's ever been told. We get to build all this kind of fresh from the ground up. Um, but as a part of that, yeah, you're not trying to reinvent Superman completely, right? Like this character has been around for almost 100 years and has endured because of what's powerful with him, what resonates about him, and a lot of that goes back to to know who that character was in 1938 and who he was to Siegel and Schuster. And so with me, really the driving thing with Absolute Superman was to do exactly that. Look at like what did that character mean to the guys who created him? What's most important about who he is and what he represents, and how do we do that? A fresh take on that looks at it through the lens of those previous 90 years of stories didn't exist, and I'm creating Superman here today for the very first time. So what choices do I make different than what they've made 90 years ago, and how do parts of his origin get reflected in different ways, and what do we need and what do we not need, what can we change, what do we need to change in order to tell a more um, concise version of that story. And so to me that started with Superman was kind of this ultimate immigrant story. It's created by two kids who were the sons of immigrants. um, well, that's a difference. There was a different story to them in 1938 than it is, in the present day. So I wanted Superman's story to kind of be a little darker and more challenging. The guy from the 1930s has had it kind of easy in some regards, right? His whole planet blew up, but he was a baby. He doesn't remember his parents. He doesn't remember the trauma of 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 what he lost. He doesn't even know what he lost. He doesn't know anything about it other than what he learns eventually from some crystals.
Yeah.
So this guy's older, so he has a very Kryptonian identity. He loves his parents, has a great relationship with them. So he remembers very vividly what was taken away from him when his planet was destroyed, and then the classic Superman we know, gets rocketed to Earth and gets found by the most loving couple that he possibly could be found by, and gets this very idyllic upbringing in Kansas before he goes off to be Superman. Well, I mean, this version of the character, he's still going to wind up being that guy who does the Superman things, right? But the fact that he becomes that guy and is fighting for this planet that he comes to love, despite everything he's enduring along the way, of a planet that really, really is telling him he doesn't belong here. And he sees kind of the worst of that humanity has to offer, the way he's treated, yet still he's the one fighting for us. I mean, I think that's a powerful version of that story. So yeah, the idyllic upbringing in Kansas didn't happen in that to Absolute Superman. I mean, we still see he came here, and I say here because I live in Kansas. I'm in Kansas right now. I believe the first ongoing Superman writer to actually live in Kansas.
Really?
I think so. Even
Oh, wow.
Smallville, I guess, historically wasn't always said to be in Kansas. It's kind of changed over the years as to where Smallville was, where Metropolis was. And if you've been reading Absolute Superman, there's clues in there without coming out and saying exactly where Smallville is. There'll be clues as we've seen a little bit of Metropolis so far. We'll go back there soon. There'll be more clues there. So where geographically, where are these places? So I think we're putting down flags a little more with the Absolute Universe because we're making all this up as we go, right? In terms of where are Batman and Superman and Wonder Woman actually at in relation to each other. So there'll be kind of more clues to that as we go. But yeah, the issue that just came out, I forgot what issue number it is. Was it 12 or 13? I think 13 was the one that just came out. It's the beginning of the kind of the battle of the siege of Smallville, the Battle of Kansas. And there's a lot of Kansas references that I put in there. So I'm trying to make it that part of it, even though that part of the story is radically different from the version that we know, that's still a very important piece of the puzzle and the story of kind of the Kents and Superman's relationship to Kansas. That's really just beginning. So there'll be much more of that to come.
Yeah, it was 13. 13 just came out.
Cool. Thanks. I forget the issues because,
last week.
Cool.
Yeah, I've been loving it. I've been loving the Absolute Universe. It seems like the response, at least some of the circles I'm in and on social media, seems to have been overwhelmingly, positive to all of the Absolute Universe. In particular, Absolute Superman, I've just really been loving.
Thanks. Yeah. I mean, we all, as we were working on these books, we all very much had it on our minds of like, we want these to be accessible to everybody. Like, if you've been reading Superman and Batman comics your entire life, we want this to still be a book that you'll recognize the characters, is a book that'll surprise you and hook you. And also, if you've never read a comic in your entire life, like, we wanted this to be something that would hopefully draw you in and appeal to you, which, we as comic book creators, we have those ambitions so many times, and with new projects and new initiatives.
Mhm.
With this, I'm happy to say those turns out those people are real. Like, I've met a lot of them over the course of the last year of doing conventions and appearances. And I was in a comic book store just the other day, and somebody was picking up Superman, and the Absolute was kind of what got him collecting comics. So I've met a surprising number of those people who have gotten into comics because of the Absolute line, which is incredibly gratifying and exciting. And you just feel the responsibility of that, of making sure, like, we've done a cool thing here so far, right? I think all of us working on these books, we've created something that has struck a nerve in a big way. And it's just a question of how do we take care of it, and where do we go from here in a way where we don't want to squander what we've got, and how we've been able to get people's attention. And so I think we all talk about that a lot. We have regular calls and meetings where we're planning out not just what are we doing in our individual books, but what is the story of this universe, and how do we tell that in ways that are not what you would expect us to do. I think the Absolute Evil one shot that came out a month or two ago that Al
Mhm.
Ewing wrote was kind of the first
Yeah.
piece of that. And so I want this to, I feel like this first year of Superman has had a lot of surprises in it. And there'll continue to be surprises. There's surprises in the next issue, in issue 14, which is kind of really what everything since issue 1 has been building towards. This is kind of, in my mind, just one big arc. These first 14 issues, which will be two trades. That was one story. So the end of that story changes Superman and his world in a big way that we'll deal with going forward. So I think we want this to continue to be a book that's or a world, a universe that will surprise you and go. We don't want to just do what seems obvious. Like, I think we want to continue to try to keep people on their toes with the Absolute line.
Yeah. Um, Jason, I don't want to keep you too much longer. I just wanted to mention so listeners know a couple of things that I thought were pretty exciting. Dynamite Comics has been doing some very exciting stuff recently, and I saw announced that you are going to be doing or writing a Thundarr the Barbarian comic coming out, I think, in January. Um,
I think it is January.
so I thought that's I mean, I don't know how many listeners will remember the Thundarr the Barbarian cartoon, but I think
If
that's
you're
very
my age,
exciting.
I think you absolutely remember the Thundarr the Barbarian
Well,
cartoon.
yeah,
If you
I
don't
do.
remember it, you're in for a treat. Yeah, it was
Yeah,
my favorite Saturday morning cartoon when I was a kid. When I was that same kid who, was living in the Bug Wars house and playing in that backyard and falling in love with comics. He was a huge Thundarr fan, so love that show. It's got one of the greatest, opening title sequences in cartoon history, where comet streaks between the Earth and the Moon, and in 1994, and unleashes cosmic destruction. And then you flash forward 2,000 years. So this is a post-apocalyptic story, but the world has become, part like sword and sorcery. So it's
yeah,
barbarians and weird mutant creatures and evil wizards. And it was created in large part by Steve Gerber, the great Steve Gerber, comic writer, creator of Howard the Duck, and guy who wrote tons and tons of amazing, wild, off the wall comic books. And then Alex Toth did the designs, a lot of the character designs, and then Jack Kirby took over for him and did tons of work on the series. So the show has an incredible comic book pedigree. But despite that, this new book for Dynamite is the first time Thundarr has ever appeared in a comic book. Um, so yeah, it was super. That was one of those jobs where I think I maybe told Nick Barucci, like, you know, I'll fight anybody else you want to try to hire to write Thundarr. Like, I have to write this book. I think I've been waiting waiting 40 years to get the chance to write my own
Yeah.
version of Thundarr. So I want it to feel in the same way. I'm proud of what I did on Star Wars, and how all of us working on that series were able to kind of make it feel big and important and weighty.
Yeah.
We want this to be the same thing. So I think if you're a fan of the show, it is laden with references to the show. But I think if you've never seen it, you'll still be able to pick up on the story and enjoy it, for everything that we pack into the page. And it's gonna be big. It's like a very special episode of Thundarr where it's like the biggest threat and story he's ever faced, and we'll also kind of explore the origin of the character. Kind of when he got his sun sword and first met Ariel and Ukla, which was never on the show. They
Yeah.
Gerber kind of had thoughts on it, which he talks about in interviews, and they kind of seed a little bit of it in the opening titles of the show, but they never got around to doing it. So we'll also get that story in the book too.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, I mean, for listeners who aren't familiar, I think it was on ABC for like 2 seasons, like 1979 and 80 or 80 and 81, like
Yeah, I think
somewhere
80 and
around there, but
81. Yeah, then they kind of
yeah.
reran it for a bit after that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
It's on. You can get it on Prime, and there's a
Yeah.
DVD box set out
No, that's
there.
awesome. And I
Um,
also saw announced that Hulu has, had made a pilot order for Southern Bastards. So that's when that news drops, and I'm sure it's something, you're involved in, obviously, and either as a producer, creator of the initial comic book. With, comic writers sometimes and artists sometimes talk about projects get, optioned all the time and don't ever like go anywhere. When it gets to a point though where like Hulu has, put in for a pilot order, um, for a series, like do you get excited about stuff like that whenever it happens, or do you take the approach, well, if it actually makes it to TV, or does that stuff, how much does that affect you to actually see something like that, come to fruition? Or are you more of a practical, like, as I'm just, waiting for if I get paid?
yeah, I mean, I think when you go down that road a few times in terms of Hollywood, I mean, I've been involved in a lot of situations before that seemed very promising and cool people involved, and you like how things look, and then it all just fizzles out and goes nowhere.
Yeah.
From things that were optioned, and um, you know, the only thing I ever had that was filmed was there was a pilot of Scalped, that was shot back in the day, and so all that
Right.
stuff is cool, and um, I always prefer to be involved as opposed to not. Um, but you never know, like, what the secret sauce is of how does anything actually get made. Um, Especially these days, it seems kind of more challenging than ever, to get stuff made. Um, with the package for Southern Bastards, it's a really really exciting group of people. And yeah, I've been a part of working on this for a few years, and I'm very excited about what we got. It felt great to finally get that green light and to be moving forward on that. And then we'll see. There's still no guarantee that you'll get to see it, that we'll get a full season. So those questions are all still to be answered. Um, if it does move forward, I'll be very involved in it. That's my plan. Um, but at the end of the day, I'm not looking to change jobs. Like, I love what I do. If anything, the more I have been involved with Hollywood stuff over the years, I think it makes me appreciate even more what we get to do in comics, and that, our industry is certainly not perfect, and um, there's no perfect situation there, but we're so spoiled in terms of the fact that if I could make up an idea for a comic book tonight and know that I'm going to be able to bring this thing to life, right? Like I can get the script written, I can find an artist to draw it, we can find somebody to publish it. So a matter of months after we, figure out what that book is, it'll exist and it'll be on shelves in comic book stores, and you'll be able to go pick it up and read it and get the version of it that we wanted to make. Those of us who made it, this is what we wanted it to be. I don't know how you ever walk away from that, like that just sort of immediate gratification. The Hollywood is very much not that, despite everything that's great about it. I think we're very, very spoiled in terms of comics, and that if I want to do something, chances are I'm going to get to do it, and that's hard to. What more can you ask for as a creator, right? So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I will. Despite what else, there's other stuff I'd like to do. Like I said, I'm enjoying getting back to writing some prose, and I would love to do more of that. And I have other stuff I'm, interested in terms of Hollywood stuff, but none of that for me is ever going to replace like working in comics, which is what I've wanted to do since I was that kid, watching Thundarr. I figured out around that time, once I realized like people make comic books, like this is made by people, that's what they do for a living. I realized, well, that's what I want to do. And once I was somehow able to stumble my way into that industry, I don't ever plan on leaving.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, Jason, I can't thank you enough for coming on the podcast tonight. I'll put links in the show notes, listeners. I can't. You've heard me talk about comics before, and I try to be very positive and tell you stuff that I like. I love Bug Wars. I mean, if you pick up one comic that I've recommended on this podcast, it really should be Bug Wars. It is so much fun. It is. I just the language in it. Yeah, Jason is holding up the trade, but I'll put a
It's a
link in the
nice
show
cover.
notes. You can get it. Let your local comic shop know that you want it. They should be able to get it for you. You can get it wherever you get your comic books, and also I'll put links and reminders to check out Thundarr, to check out the Spider
The
the
Spider Witch special.
Spider Witch special, which is coming out as part of Bug Wars, Thundarr the Barbarian. And yeah, if you haven't read some of Jason's other comics, I mean, Southern Bastards, Scalped, are just tremendous. I'll also put
Scalped is newly available in omnibus format. Those just came out
yeah. I'll also
last
put
year.
a plug out for Jason, and I think Ron Garney did Men of Wrath, which is
Yeah,
one I really liked. So
another very dark Southern crime drama. I'm also 180 degrees away from that is I'm still doing Uncle Scrooge for Marvel that's coming out right now, and I think issue 3 of that just came out recently. So issue 4 is the end of that miniseries, and it's I did a Uncle Scrooge story a couple years ago called the Uncle Scrooge and the Infinity Dime, and this is a follow up
oh
to
yeah,
that. Uncle Scrooge or Mightiest Duck, is that what it's called? Earth's Mightiest Hero. I forgot the name of my own book. Yeah, I'm a huge Uncle Scrooge fan. That book has meant a lot to me. So one more issue to go, and I'm really proud of that whole package came together too.
awesome, awesome. Well, Jason, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast. This has been awesome for me, and I'm just a huge fan of your work, and just absolutely love what you and Mahmud and the rest of the team have done on Bug Wars. So
Cheers, I
thank you
appreciate
very
it.
much.
Thank you. Thanks for having
And
me.
of course, shout out to my brother Bobby, the Cryptid Creator Corner's #1 most dedicated fan. Bobby listens to all my episodes, and he's going to be really annoyed that I've read all of Bug Wars before
Thanks,
him.
Bobby.
um, So yeah, thank you, listeners. Rate, review us, do all that stuff they tell you to do for podcasts. It does really help. And if you ever see me on social media and you need any comic recommendations, please let me know. I got plenty of them. So thank you very much for listening, and I'll see you next time. Good night.
Thanks.